Great day, everyone, and welcome to 3CP TV. My name is Yathis Johnson, and I am back. I am the founder and president of Third Culture People. So 3CP TV, we have been on a hiatus for a little bit, but we are a media resource helping individuals become third culture people, where you learn how to embrace the greater variety of human and cultural identities and skillfully bridge the gap between our differences. So when you watch 3CP TV, you learn how to connect with anyone at any time from anywhere in the world. Becoming a third culture person not only grows you personally, but it grows you professionally, allowing you to expand beyond your wildest imaginations and your limitations. Today, we have with us Iliah Grant Altoro, who is a writer, a speaker, an activist. She is an amazing woman. She's a international traveler from Minneapolis. We'll talk more and give more about her intro. But right now, I just want Iliah for you to say hello to our 3CP TV audience.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and share my passions and share my heart for intercultural studies and interactions with you.
Yeah. So at 3CP, we changed the way you view DE&I everywhere. And so today we're going to, we want to celebrate cultural similarities while respecting and bridging the gap between our differences. As we said, that's what we do. And what I love about this guest right here, she is just an amazing woman. She's a homeschooling mama, again, from Minneapolis. And she's a mama of three amazing critical thinking free spirits. Iliah is the founder of Negra Bohemian, a community devoted to revolutionary mothering. She's an amazing intentional traveler. She decolonizes faith, and she is raising socially conscious global learners. She spent over 20 years traveling the world, 13 of those with her children in tow, and telling honest stories that challenge the masses to think outside of the box. Let me tell you, Iliah is an amazing storyteller. I'm going to let her just fly today. Okay. I'm going to let her go for it. But we want to start with, I've given this intro, but I want Iliah to tell us a little bit more beyond what I just said. So Iliah, go for it.
Well, again, I'm really excited to be here today. And one of my biggest passions is to bridge cultural gaps and extend understanding interculturally for those who, some people just don't know exactly how to do that. So it's really exciting to be here and to be able to share. And it's what I've done in my travels. It's what I do in my writing. It's what I do in my mothering. And what I do intentionally while homeschooling my children is to teach them to bridge these gaps and to think outside the box and to pay attention to the littlest details that other people might not pay attention to. And I think it's something that I learned from my grandfather, who always said that, some people think that they're very open-minded if they can see two sides of a story, but really there's actually 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 10 sides to a story. And so he always encouraged me to think deeper, to go further, and to figure out those different elements and sides of a story that other people aren't paying attention to, because in that is where you find truth, and that is where you find unity. It's where you find community, and that's how you actually build bridges. Because I always say too, within diversity, there is diversity, and sometimes we get stuck on diversity in these boxes of, oh, this is Blackness, or this is what it means to be Latino. This is what it means to be Asian. And a lot of times within that diversity, there is diversity. Like there are Arab Latinos, there are Arab Asian, you can go back and forth. And there are Eastern Europeans with Mongolian genes. And so they have Asian defined eyes. And so we have so many different stories to tell, and the world actually is so much closer than we think that we are, because of these little details, these sides of a story that most people won't take the time to do the research or to do that hard work. And I've done the research, and I've done that hard work.
You've done a lot of research. And so we want to bring out these stories, but there's two questions, starting questions that I want to ask you. One, when people look at you, there's a big question mark. What is she? Okay. So tell us your cultural background, because we're all about culture. We love, we love accentuating culture, highlighting culture, people's background, right? So that's one question. And then the second question I want to ask you is your passions, your talents, your gifts. What's your calling? How are you using those to fulfill your purpose in life, your calling in life? So those are the two questions.
Okay. Well, first of all, I identify myself as Afro-Española, a Black Spaniard, and my mother is, both of my parents are mixed race, and they're Black. I want to say that they are Black, but they are mixed race. And my mother is half Spanish and half Black American, and my dad was half white, Irish, German, French, Canadian, and Black American. And so I reach into all of those cultures because my grandfather, who was a huge researcher and a lover of all things Black, taught me that that you do have Africa, and Blackness always has to be the center, the anchor of your soul. And when you are anchored, then you are free to explore all of these other elements of who you are, and to never put myself in boxes. Everyone is going to put me in a box, but not to put myself into a box, and explore and identify with all that I am and love it and appreciate it. Wow. But you have to have something that anchors your soul. So I tell people I am, looks wise, I'm very racially ambiguous, but I'm not. That ambiguity doesn't then reach into who I am and what I know of myself. I might look racially ambiguous, but I am not racially ambiguous. That ambiguity is not brought confusion to me. Wow. That makes sense.
Wow. You should write a book on that, because there are a lot of people when they're mixed, especially when they come from America, and now they have, something Asian American, African American, whatever, tagged on as giving them this particular identity, they struggle with that. There's a struggle. And so you seem to have an anchor, have yourself rooted. Your identity is sure. And that probably helps you to travel and do the things that you do.
Yeah. And probably as well, I think what's different is I don't have a parent of I have two Black identifying parents that they are mixed race, but it's not like I had one parent that was of one race, one parent that was another, which maybe in some ways, maybe my story is a tad bit more confusing than saying, oh, it's just this and this, these two things. But I don't know. I always had those anchors around me, and I never, like I tell people, I've never had pumpkin pie ever in my life. I've only eaten sweet potato pie. So oh my gosh, this is not something that I guess was it always made sense to me. I guess that's what I have.
I love sweet potato pie, so I won't take anything from you on that one. Hey, let's go to that second question, Iliah.
Okay.
Your talents.
What was it again? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So how are you using your gifts, your talents, your skills, the things that your experiences to fulfill your calling, your purpose in life?
Okay. Well, that's a whole nother story about callings and purpose, because that can be a little confusing at times of, is it one destiny and bust, or is a calling evolving? And there's an element, there's an essence of something, but it's constantly evolving and leading, sometimes going down winding roads. I know some people have this one destiny that they feel that they've been called to. I don't know. Well, I think I used to feel like that, but not anymore. But anyway, I know though, what I am called to do is to tell the truth and to speak truth, even when other people don't want to speak it, to say what needs to be said in the most loving and understanding type of way, but still with firmness, to help open up the eyes of others to see things that they wouldn't normally be able to see, and hopefully draw people together, which would be the ultimate goal of saying, here are some differences, and they're vast, but how can we still come together, not in a cheesy way of let's hold hands and sing kumbaya and let's all get along, but what information has been missing, what heart connection has been missing to keep certain people divided or to keep us all divided, and what can I do? I think I use my skills to help draw people in and give them information and give them heart lessons that allow, I would say, almost like a binding together of others.
Yeah. It's good. It's good. Now, you are a writer and you're an activist, but you do a lot of writing and speaking. And as I was talking to you a couple of weeks ago, you had mentioned some very obscure stories that I never heard of. You brought out facts and details of things that just blew me away. I would love for you to share a couple of those stories, a few of those stories. I think one was a woman that many people don't know, an Asian woman that worked with Malcolm X. There was a story you told me about Mexicans, I believe, or Africans in Mexico. And then, so share with us some of these stories, some of these things that you have researched and discovered, and you're making it known now to the public.
Sure.
And your audience.
Well, the woman that you're referring to, her name was Yuriko Chiyama. And she was a Japanese American. She was a first generation, what they call a Nisei, Japanese American, who grew up in California, and she was an internment camp survivor. And actually her dad had a merchant company, a fishing merchant company, and he was always under investigation by the CIA even before Pearl Harbor. And after Pearl Harbor, he was actually arrested by the US government and held for a while, and they finally released him. He was a diabetic and they wouldn't give him insulin. And when they released him from jail, he died only a few days later. And so this always impacted her. And she was a Sunday school teacher, and she always asked God to use her to be a humble servant, to do his bidding, to not just to look at those with status and privilege and be drawn to them, but that she would be drawn to the meek and the lowly, like he was, like his son was. And she ended up, her mother and one of her brothers, where she had two brothers, one was in the US military, another one ended up in internment camps with them. And this was her first time. She kind of felt like she had this all-American childhood and upbringing, and ended up in this all-Japanese environment. And it brought out this sense of pride and this sense of injustice, and how she wanted to do what she could to change the world. And she ended up marrying another Japanese American. They moved to New York City and lived in Harlem in housing projects. And she had 6 kids. It just slipped my mind. I think 5 or 6 kids. And they raised them in Harlem in Black American, Black Caribbean, and Latin Caribbean cultures. They were surrounded by Black Americans, Black Caribbeans, and Puerto Ricans. And so they saw all of this injustice, and she began to organize. They were part of the Freedom Schools of Harlem. She talks about this journey, this evolution that she had, that she was on one path, which was integration, and she ends up meeting Malcolm X after a protest. They became friends. He actually, when they were Hiroshima survivors, traveling the world speaking, they stayed at Yuriko Chiyama's home, her and her husband and her children's housing project apartment. And Malcolm X came to their home to visit and to speak to these atomic bomb survivors. And as he traveled, he would send them postcards. So they had this collection of postcards that he would send them from around the world. And Yuri was actually there when he died. Her and one of her sons were at the Audubon Ballroom. And there's actually, in the movie, she is kind of erased. And there's a woman who they have, Angela Bassett, who plays the wife, Betty Shabazz, in the movie. And you see Betty running to the stage and holding up his head, but that was actually Yuri who did that. And when Malcolm was shot, she ran to the stage, and as men were surrounding, she held up his head and said, "Malcolm, don't die, please don't die." And so it was this friendship with Malcolm X that actually transformed her. And as I said she was going on one path, integration, and then she moved to another path, which was liberation. And so she began to join groups like the New Africa Republic, which was a radical Black liberation group. She joined the Young Lords, which was the Puerto Rican version of the Black Panthers. And so not only was she there when Malcolm X died, there's actually a very famous moment in history when the Young Lords occupy the Statue of Liberty, and they hang the Puerto Rican flag outside of the Statue of Liberty, a huge Puerto Rican flag, to protest for Puerto Rican independence. And Yuri was there with them when they did that. And so,
is there a book about her?
She has a memoir that she wrote called Passing It On. And it's really a story that she's giving. She wrote it for her grandchildren and for her great grandchildren. And I've read it. It's really good. It somewhat doesn't go into total depth of some of her views and things like that, but it's still a really good book. And I actually wrote a children's book about her. And
what's the name of that book?
That book right now is called Y is for Yuri, the ABCs of Yuri Kochiyama. So hopefully soon it will be published and available to the public. So,
well, we're going to be waiting for that. Okay. We're going to be waiting for that book. Okay. All right. Let's go to another story. Tell us another one of your research-based obscure stories that many of us don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think one of the things that stands out for me right now, because it's a work that I'm doing right now on a blog post on Hispanic Latino children's literature. And I think there's a lot of people don't realize the Arabic, the Islamic influence in Hispanic culture and Latino culture, because there was a time when Spain was ruled by the Moors for over 800 years. And so there's actually over 4,000 words in Spanish that are derived from Arabic. And so like all throughout Spain, there's, especially in Andalusia in southern Spain, there is so much Moorish and Islamic culture that is still there. Like you can go to some parts of southern Spain and cross the ferry over to Morocco, and you won't even, it would, architectural wise, it would be hard to even tell the difference between the two, you know? And there's a long history of even Africa. At one time in history, Spain had the largest Black population, even outside of the Moors, in all of Europe. It was like the Black haven of Europe. And that influence then even spread into Latin America. And when people think of even Latin American culture, people are just now discovering that Black people exist within that. And then there's mestizos, which are a mix of like indigenous and Spaniard, which is what most people would think of what a Latino person is. And then indigenous peoples, but there's actually a lot of East Asian culture in Latin America. There are lots, especially Chinese, Japanese, Korean cultures and communities. Brazil actually has the largest Japanese diaspora in the world outside of Brazil. And most people think, it must be in the United States. And there's actually even a lot of Peruvian Japanese persons, Latin American Japanese persons from Peru, Mexico, Argentina, during World War II, when the United States had interned Japanese, Peru, Mexico, Argentina actually sent their Japanese citizens, a lot of their Japanese citizens, to the United States to also be put in internment camps. And then once the war was over, they were kind of left in limbo where they weren't invited back to Latin America, but they weren't US citizens like the other Japanese internment survivors. And so they were kind of left in this status of not having a country to even go back to. So a lot of them stayed in the US illegally or maybe married other Japanese Americans, but it's a lot of unknown history that's even tied into our own history with how we've treated the Japanese and these interconnections. And even there are tons in Latin America actually has the largest communities of West Asians, which the Middle East, so Syrians, Lebanese, Palestinians, they're huge. There are over like 10 million, 20 million peoples of Arab descent in Latin America. And it's really funny because in Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, they drink this drink called mate. And it comes from indigenous peoples of that area. And you drink it in this thing with a straw. Well, what they call it looks like a straw, but it's made of metal. And it's actually, mate is also drank in Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, because there were so many West Asians that were going to Latin America and South America that once some of them started to go back to the Levant, they brought this tradition of drinking mate. So it's very common, especially in Druze communities. Like when you walk into a home, they offer you mate, and Chile, actually the country of Chile has the largest Palestinian community in the world outside of the Middle East. So there are huge communities of Palestinians and of course, in Palestine and Syria and Jordan and Lebanon because they were refugees. But there are huge droves of Palestinians that actually live in Chile, the largest community, Honduras, El Salvador. Actually, the current president of El Salvador, he has an Arab name because his father is Palestinian.
Wow. That's so amazing. So you've traveled, Iliah, around the world, right? With your children as a way of educating them and developing them into the individuals you desire for them to be, where however you felt, God was leading you and so forth. What are some things that you were surprised about as you travel various countries? Where were some insights that you can share with our 3CP TV audience that just blew you away?
Sure. I think one of the biggest things is that I always take away from is, especially because I traveled alone when I was single, but then when I became a mother, I was determined to bring my children with me. And how warm and welcoming the world is to children and how much they embrace children. And they, most people be like, aren't you afraid to travel by yourself with the kids? I'm like, actually, I kind of feel more protected with them because when people see me, they see me as a mom and we become somebody's granddaughter and somebody's niece and becomes our uncle and our auntie. And we just have collected, I tell people, most people are concerned about collecting passport stamps and we're collecting a global family. And so I think that just to go to so many different places on different continents and find this common ground of community and family and warmth and openness. If it's like my kids and I, we were in Slovenia and my son was maybe 1.5 and he was kicking around a soccer ball and this man just came up and started kicking the soccer ball with him. And then his wife came and his kids, and they were this Croatian German family. The mom and dad were Croatian and so were the kids, but the kids grew up in Germany, and through very little their broken English and our non-existent German, our Croatian Serbian, we became friends and I still talk with them. And, we end up meeting and we'd have ice cream together. And then they brought their mom. And so we met the grandma and it was just the world came together. It always comes together. And I think that there's so much more that it sounds cliche, but there's so much more that actually can unite us than divide us. And I have these stories from I could tell you stories of in Thailand when my girls, I was traveling by myself through Southeast Asia and my girls were 5 or almost 5 and 1.5 or 2.5. And I potty trained my 2.5-year-old at the time on squatty potties on trains throughout Southeast Asia. And one night we were traveling.
Hey, and the beauty about Thailand and places like that, you don't really need toilet paper.
Exactly. Exactly. You just clean yourself with water. And, you just think of like all of these things, like
Yeah.
we ended up in third class. We were going to be in second class and have these, the seats fold down into beds. And we missed the train because the cab driver had to stop for gas and he was like behind 10 people. And so we ended up, the only ticket that we had to go for that night was in third class. And so we did it, and there was no AC, the windows were down, and one of my daughters was laying on the lap of this Thai lady, and my 2.5-year-old was in my arms. And I remember I wake up and I just hear this pop, 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 and it like startled me. And when I look up, there's this older gentleman who was watching me, and he stayed up because the windows were open and mosquitoes were coming in, and he stayed up all night just popping mosquitoes from around us so they wouldn't eat us up.
Wow.
And like, it's those little things, those beautiful things, those little stories that I think it's what always keeps us going back. It's always those connections that we build. We can see beautiful sites that we've seen, the Eiffel Tower, we've seen the pyramids of Egypt, we've been to Mount Sinai and camped on the Red Sea, and these are amazing things. But it's always when we go back to it, when I ask my kids when they were little, like, what do you remember about this trip? They're like, oh, I remember our Malaysian auntie and our Malaysian uncle. And I remember this person. And they remember the love, the love.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Iliah. We're running out of time, and I'm just going to take the liberty to squeeze one more story out of you quickly about some obscure thing that you discovered about a society or a culture that you just want to, put it out there for us, just, throw it out to us here.
Well, I just want to, this is something that I was been researching recently for the blog post, like more in depth. So I'm just going to go back to Moorish rule of Spain. And, I tell people that's really amazing when you think about it, like putting history into perspective. At one time, Spain was a Muslim country and Turkey was a Christian nation, was considered a Christian nation. Wow. And some of the amazing things that were going on in Islamic Spain was they were the center of science and the arts and humanities and philosophy. That was the heart of it all in Europe at the time, and this really funny story that I found out as I was researching was that in Cadiz, which was the capital of the Moorish Empire of Spain, it's a city in southern Spain and Andalusia, that they had built. I mean, it was a huge city of over 100,000 people. There were merchant shops everywhere. There were universities. There were like 7, 8, 9, 10 universities before even Europe had universities. There were universities in Moorish Spain. And so in Islam, the culture is very cleanliness means something, And so there were public baths all over Cadiz because it was really important for people to be clean. And so, and also, there was during this time, there were no like paved roads in London and Paris. There were no street lights. They were walking on like dirt roads. But in Islamic Spain, they had paved roads. They had like light posts that lit up the city at night. But my favorite part of it all is that with these bathhouses, they would say that for a poor Moor would rather go without bread than soap and water, because that's how important cleanliness was to them and how they were advanced in keeping themselves sanitary and clean. And Queen Elizabeth I of England actually prided herself in only taking one bath in her entire life. But a poor Moor would rather go without bread than soap and water. Wow.
So this is just amazing. So Iliah Grant Altoro, Unleashed. I've unleashed you. I said, hey, I want you to tell your stories because they are
have a lot to say.
They are powerful. So, hey, listen, I want to thank our audience for tuning in to 3CP TV. We have been on a break for the summer, but we're back. And so thank you for tuning in, where you learn how to connect with anyone at any time from anywhere in the world. So Iliah, will you just share with our audience how they can contact you? What are some ways that you allow people in the public arena to just connect?
Sure. Well, I'm pretty active on social media, especially Instagram. So you can find me at Negra Bohemian, Negra, Negra, Black in Spanish, and then Bohemian, the word, Negra Bohemian. And that's my blog. My website is also www.negrabohemian.com. And it's easy to find me and connect with me there. You can read my posts, my articles that range from stories of motherhood, of authentic travel. Also, I've been focusing a lot on children's literature, but not just making book lists that are just books, but giving links and history information and different resources to help parents and educators go deeper with the stories that I'm presenting to them, because I understand that many don't have the don't have the resources, and they want to, and might not even have the know-how of like, where would I even begin? And so to take things deeper, I try to do that, and posts on foreign films for children, because foreign films have been influential in my life, and also
I love foreign films.
My children's lives. My girls have been watching Bollywood since they were like 3 years.
Wow,
they were toddlers.
Bollywood.
And so then they moved on to Palestinian films, and foreign films have just been really important, such an important learning resource. So I have some information.
Oh, wow. I would love that. Yeah, I definitely need to connect, because I have a list of some foreign films, but if I can add to that resource list, that would be great. So we're definitely going to connect. Listen, thank you so much, Iliah. We appreciate. Audience, this is a treat. And I wanted to take time to go a little longer with Iliah, because I know of her, some of her stories and things she's shared with me. But I want to thank you for tuning in to 3CP TV once again. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, 3CPT, where you view our latest episodes. Also subscribe to LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're all on those social media networks. Love to continue having you join us in this journey to become a third culture person. Thank you once again, and be well.